Hello and welcome. Here we are with part 2 of the Pilot T-511 restoration. It's been a week since I made the last video. I know it came out just a couple of days ago, but I hadn't even found time to edit and put it up. It's been about a week and we've made some progress. You may or may not remember this whole area and this whole area of the cabinet had been split open and it all was delaminated. This was fairly easy to deal with because it's only about an inch wide. We just filled it up with glue, did some real solid clamping on it, let it sit for 24 hours, and we had the same problem down here. This was all delaminated along here. That's all been repaired. Good and solid now. What wasn't obvious in the video, I'm sure, this piece was delaminated and cracked. I hooked it and cracked it. That was a dumb move. But at any rate, what wasn't obvious in the video was this whole area was a big blister. The panel had delaminated. There was another blister over here, and there was a blister in the veneer on the side. Now, it was undamaged other than that, and I didn't want to further damage either the bottom or the side. So I said to myself, how am I going to glue this together? Well, I came up with a plan. What I did, you can probably see this little dark area here and the dark area here. What I did is I drilled a hole from this side into the wood and stopped short of the veneer, just short of the veneer. Now that wasn't hard because, oh, let me give you a little drawing. This gives me a chance to show off my superb artistic skills, as I'm sure you'll agree. What we have here is my drill chuck, the nose of the chuck, a very small drill bit, the first 3 layers of plywood, and the blistered veneer. And I set the drill so that it would only penetrate as far as the 3 layers of wood. And the way I did that was by choking up on the bit very close so that it could not penetrate any deeper than the face of the chuck. Now, some people like to tape the bit. I find that method doesn't work. If you're not extremely careful, when the drill tip breaks through, the sudden thrust usually just shoves the tape up the drill bit and you end up poking out the other side. Worst case, if your drill won't go in deep enough, and there I just set it in a little deeper, if it won't go in deep enough, you can always score the shaft back here and break off the bit so that it's a lot shorter, and if you need to make a shorter protrusion on your drill bit. By the way, if you haven't tried one of these rigid, and they didn't give me this, that I paid for this. This is the second one of these I've purchased. These things are torquey enough to break your wrist, and they're guaranteed for life, including the batteries. I picked this up at the Homeless Despot, and it's the second one I've bought, and they are scary powerful. At any rate, I digress. I drill through the back into the cavity underneath the blister. Then I used one of these applicator syringes. This is a 14 gauge. You can pick these up on any eBay site or anything like that. They're readily available. These are not medical needles. These are blunt needles. You can't use them for anything other than their intended purpose, unless you're a real jackass. But once this is slid in here, and I make this hole the same diameter as the 14 gauge needle, once this is slid in here, you just inject some Elmer's glue. And now the Elmer's glue, you simply dip the needle in, pull the plunger back, and give it about 5 seconds, and the syringe will fill with Elmer's glue. Then you can slip it in here and put a couple of milliliters through the hole into the blister. Then the next trick I taught myself is commonly see is people using blocks of wood when they clamp. The trouble with that is the wood will stick to any glue that leaks back. Now, the normal trick used to be put paper down, then put the block of wood so you can pull the block off the paper and then sand the paper. That seemed like a rather tedious method to me, so I came up with this. I put down a layer of saran wrap on both sides. and I use these chunks of aluminum. This is 1/2 inch thick. One on this side and a larger one on the other side where the blister was, to make sure it was absolutely flat when I got through. Then I use one of these guys, a real clamp, and put some serious pressure on these. That serves two purposes. One, it hydraulically pushes the glue out underneath the veneer, and if there's any areas that aren't evident that it's loose, it will force the glue out there. With enough pressure, the saran wrap will seal the hole up, other than the small leakage you see there. The saran wrap seals the hole up. The saran wrap or Glad wrap or whatever you use absolutely will not stick to the glue. When you remove the clamp, this just lifts off after the glue's dried for 24 hours. There is no sticking. Absolutely none. And that gives me an absolutely flat surface when it's done. After the gluing is finished, I have one of these on each side with the saran wrap on each side in case the, let's say, your veneer may split. Mine didn't. But if it did split, the saran wrap will prevent anything from sticking to where the glue might have leaked out on the other side. The result is a perfectly flat surface that's as solid as the day it left the factory. I am so pleased with that method. This worked so extremely well. And I put about 1.5 milliliters to 2 milliliters for a blister that was about 3 inches in diameter. It's one of those things you're going to have to experiment with and see how much glue is needed. But this works like a charm. Okay, now all I have left to do is clean up the finish, and I'll probably go over this with some 4/0 steel wool, then go over it with a either a stain, or I forget what they call it, where they it's like a wash that goes over it just to bring the color back. We'll clean off all the little paint drops that are on it and all that type of crap. But that's where the cabinet stands at the moment. A little bit more work and that should look pretty good. I don't know if you remember what these looked like, but they were in pretty sorry shape. The back side, I'll probably spray some clear on there to prevent it from corroding any further. But we cleaned them, washed them, scrubbed them, sanded them, primed them, and then painted them a color that is dead on the original color. I happen to have a can of this gold colored paint, and did a test strip and compared it to, there was an area on both edges that had never been out to see the, been outside exposed to the elements because it's behind the cabinet. And this paint is an exact match. It was incredible. We picked up some gold colored grill cloth. It had gold colored grill cloth behind it originally. The pattern is different, but that's not important. All this does is fill in on the back so that you don't have the as dark an area where the holes are without it and with it. Now, it's not probably going to be real evident on the camera, but it sure makes it look a lot better with the gold grill cloth behind it. So that will take care of these two panels that fit on the sides here, on each side of the dial indicator. And that's certainly going to look a lot better than it did when I picked it up at the flea market. We're probably overexposing here. Let's see if we get some light backed off. There we go. That looks a little better. So we'll get these installed after we finish the cabinet and be well on our way to restoring the appearance of the radio. And this set just keeps surprising me with details that I didn't notice because of the amount of filth that was on it. This is the faceplate, or the dial faceplate, that came out of the radio. And what I did not notice the first time around was the numbers are silk screened on the front, and they are also silk screened on the back. And it's probably not very evident here in the camera because of the monocular vision, but when you're looking at this, it makes the letters look about 1/2 inch thick. They have a lot of depth to them because of the double silk screening. Very unique. The meters 13, 16, 19, 25, 31 meters are only on the front, and the pilot radio, of course, is against a background, a solid background, as broadcast and shortwave is, but all of the numbers, all of the little dots, all of the little lines are on both sides of the glass, and it really gives depth, a lot of depth. Some of them, like the ones here, are kind of worn off, which is a shame, but it's still a good looking faceplate now that it's all cleaned up. And I'm not sure if it's going to show up here on the camera or there's going to be too much glare. There, that 100 looks pretty good, I think. So that takes care of most of the cabinet work. And here we have the chassis. And you may or may not remember, this thing was so covered with rust on this surface that you couldn't read the Made in USA or their RMA or the serial number. It still isn't pretty, but it's a damn sight better looking than it was when I pulled it out of the box. I thought about glass beading this. It never crossed my mind to try to replate this, because I would have to remove all the coils, all the resistors, all the terminal strips, and this radio is a little bit too complex for that. This has got a lot more wiring, and it's a lot more complex design than most of these AC/DC sets. So much so that I decided that it would simply be too dangerous, too much chance of destroying very irreplaceable parts like coils and some of the other components in there. The terminal strips, the original terminal strips, and so on and so forth. And I could always damage the IF transformers, etc. So we're going to leave that alone. And in actuality, the underneath of this is in pretty good condition. Very little rusting evident. There's some flakes of wax because I've been rolling the caps over to get an inventory on what I had to order for replacement capacitors. There's over 20 capacitors in the bottom of this, where your average AC/DC set usually has, you know, like 7 or 8. There's 20 of them. They went to a lot of work to make sure the audio amplifier was well balanced. You've got the RF amplifier in the front end, of course, which most of these sets don't have. And we have an oscillator coil here. We have some kind of a trap here. We have the shortwave and broadcast band coils. A lot of these mica capacitors, there's quite a few mica capacitors. I didn't even figure those into the count. Just too much of a risk to strip everything out of here, sandblast this chassis, and then try to replate it. So we used an air-driven wire brush. We dug as deep as we could. Then I put a Scotch-Brite disc on a backing plate with my air tool and just went over this and dug as deep into the metal as I dared. I actually started thinning it out in places, and I said, enough is enough. We put a coat of clear coat on it to stop the rusting process. The chassis is good enough at this point. It's, you know, we've stopped the rusting process. We've cleaned off all the brown junk. We tried navel jelly on this and did not have nearly the success that I had on some other stuff that I did recently. In fact, I did a dozen applications of navel jelly, and it just didn't get into these dark crevices. And I picked at them. You know, the trick is pick the rust out and put the navel jelly on and get down to bare steel, and it just wasn't working on this. So I stopped. I said, before I do any serious damage to this, we're gonna, you know, quit while we're ahead. The little phenolic piece or bakelite or whatever it is that's here on these two trimmer caps, the threads are stripped out on one side. I'm debating, it's too thin to helicoil. There wouldn't be enough helicoil in there to reliably stay in. I'm debating whether I should just measure the capacitance of these two trimmers that are under here, one here, and replace them with some ceramic compression trimmers, or just adjust them as best I can. I added a nut on this side. This one's stripped out though. The only thing holding it is the nut. So I'm figuring if I just adjust it against the nut and probably put a drop of epoxy on it and leave it. Haven't made up my mind entirely yet. This trimmer, of course, is a ceramic trimmer and it's fine. I'm hoping that the trimmers in the IF cans are okay. I don't really want to rip those apart if I don't have to. Just again, too much of a chance of damaging something. The screws are rusty, but I suspect the mica trimmer underneath is okay. So that's where we stand at the moment. We have our chassis cleaned up. We've cleaned up the tubes. We have our new converter in. I had one in my my stock of tubes. Actually, I had 3 of them, and this one was the best of the 3. So we've installed that. We'll get all the capacitors changed. Once all the capacitors are changed in here, we'll take it upstairs on our $10 test bench and we'll do a thorough alignment of that, and you'll be along for the ride when that happens. For now, I guess that's it. We'll close this one up, keep it short. I'm the Radio Mechanic. Thanks for watching. Comments are always welcome. Subscriptions are really enjoyed. And give us a thumbs up. Talk to you later.